I refused to keep helping my mother-in-law with rent while I was on maternity leave. In retaliation, she manipulated my husband into thinking he wasn't the father of our baby by presenting false proof, leading to me getting kicked out. 5 years later, my husband wants to meet his son and reunite as a family, but I deliver the biggest shock of his life. Hi everyone, my name is Amy, 33 female. 5 years ago, my entire life fell apart. Let me start from the beginning. I met my husband Jordan, 35 male, when I was on a trip to visit my friend Sarah, who lived in this beautiful little town. I remember it was the first week of July, and the weather was just perfect. Sarah had been bugging me for ages to come and stay with her, and I finally decided to take her up on the offer. Little did I know that this trip would change my life forever. Jordan lived right next door to Sarah's place. On my first day there, I was sitting on Sarah's porch, sipping iced tea and enjoying the sunset when I saw him for the first time. He was out watering his plants, looking all calm and content. We made eye contact, and I swear I felt something shift inside me. You know that feeling when you just know something special is about to happen? That's what it was like. Sarah noticed my interest and told me that Jordan was a great guy but had been single for a while. She suggested I say hi the next time I saw him, which I did the very next day. I was on my way to grab a coffee, and there he was, sitting on his porch reading a book. I mustered up the courage to introduce myself, and we ended up chatting for almost an hour. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our love for hiking. It was so easy to talk to him, like we had known each other for years. As my trip was coming to an end, I started feeling sad about leaving. On my last night there, Jordan and I went out for dinner. It was nothing fancy, just a cozy little restaurant by the lake, but it was perfect. We talked about our lives, our dreams, and what we wanted for the future. When he dropped me off at Sarah's place, we shared our first kiss. It was like something out of a movie, fireworks, butterflies, the whole shebang. After I got back home, we kept in touch through calls and texts. It wasn't long before we were spending hours on the phone every night, talking about everything under the sun. We decided to give long distance a shot, and for the next few months, we made it work. We visited each other as often as we could. He came to see me in my city, and I went back to visit him whenever I could. Those weekends together were the highlight of my life at the time. As time went on, the distance started to become more and more challenging. We were both miserable whenever we had to say goodbye, and it was getting harder to be apart. So, after about a year of long distance, I started looking for jobs in his city. I was lucky enough to find a great opportunity, and I decided to take the plunge and move there. The one thing in our relationship that I felt was weird was his relationship with his mother, Pam. Pam and Jordan were very close. Jordan is a typical mama's boy, and Pam is one of those moms who don't think that anyone is good enough for their son. Her relationship with Jordan sometimes made me feel like the third wheel in our own relationship. One of the first instances that made me realize how close they were was when I had just moved in with Jordan. We had just settled into our new apartment and were still getting things sorted out. One evening, Pam showed up unannounced. She had a key to the place, which I didn't know she had, and walked in while we were having dinner. It was a bit awkward, to say the least. She started rearranging things in the kitchen, telling us how she thought it should be organized. I tried to laugh it off, thinking she was just being helpful, but it felt like she was trying to impose her way of doing things on us. Pam's opinions often seemed to carry more weight than mine. I remember when we were choosing furniture for our place, we found a beautiful couch that we both loved. But when Pam saw it, she made a face and said it wasn't practical and we should get something else. Jordan agreed with her, and we ended up getting a different couch, one that Pam liked but I really didn't care for. It was frustrating because I felt like my opinions and preferences were being overshadowed by hers. After Jordan proposed, Pam almost became hostile towards me. While I was planning my wedding, she tried to take over and control everything, but I stood firm and was able to have the wedding of my dreams. Let me tell you, it was not easy. Pam was like a hurricane sweeping through every aspect of our wedding plans, and I had to be the sturdy rock that stood in her way. Right after we announced our engagement, Pam started calling me every day with suggestions and ideas for the wedding. At first, I thought she was just being helpful, but it quickly became clear that she wanted to be in charge of the whole thing. She would say things like, "You should go with a traditional church wedding, Amy. It's what our family expects." Now, Jordan and I had already decided we wanted an outdoor ceremony by a lake, surrounded by nature. It was something that meant a lot to both of us, but Pam wasn't having it. She even went as far as to book a church and arrange a meeting with the pastor without consulting us. Then there was the issue with the dress. I had found the perfect dress, a simple elegant gown that made me feel like a princess. But when Pam saw it, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, that's nice, but don't you think it's a bit plain? You should go for something more extravagant, like a ball gown." She actually took me to another bridal shop and tried to get me to buy a huge puffy dress that looked like it came straight out of a fairy tale. It wasn't me at all, and I had to firmly tell her that I was sticking with my choice. She looked so disappointed, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into changing my mind. On the day of the wedding, Pam tried to take over the coordination of everything. She was telling the photographer where to set up, instructing the band on what to play, and even trying to rearrange the decorations. At one point, I had to take her aside and politely but firmly tell her that we had everything under control and that she should just relax and enjoy the day. It was tough, but I was determined to make sure that our wedding reflected who we were as a couple, not her vision. About a year after the wedding, Pam lost her job. She was working as a manager at a local store, and unfortunately, the store shut down. It was a tough time for her, and she was pretty shaken up. Jordan and I talked it over and agreed that until she could find another job, we would help her out with the rent. Pam's place wasn't too far from us, so it made sense to help her out rather than have her stress about finances on top of everything else. Pam started looking for a new job, but she kept complaining that it was hard to find one because of her age. She said, "No one wants to hire someone in their late 50s. I felt really bad for her and tried to be as supportive as possible. I even helped her update her resume and coached her on how to answer interview questions. But after a few weeks, I started to notice a pattern. Every time she went for an interview, she would come back with a story about how the interviewer didn't seem to like her or how the job wasn't a good fit because the company seemed too disorganized. She would say things like, "I can't believe how unprofessional these people are," or "I don't want to work for a place that doesn't have its act together." It began to feel like she was finding excuses not to take any job that came her way. A year passed, and Pam still hadn't been able to get a job. We were still continuing to pay her rent, and it was starting to really take a toll on our finances. But then things changed in a big way. I found out I was pregnant. It was the happiest day of my life. I had always wanted to be a mother, and knowing that I was going to have a baby made everything seem brighter. Jordan and I were over the moon with excitement, and we started preparing for our little one's arrival right away. When I was about 8 months pregnant, I decided it was time to take my maternity leave. I worked in sales, and while I still received my basic salary during my leave, my main source of income was from the commissions, which stopped as soon as I went on leave. This meant our income took a significant hit, and things got a lot tighter financially. We were managing, but it was clear we couldn't keep up with paying Pam's rent much longer without seriously compromising our own financial stability. As my due date approached, the stress of our financial situation started to weigh heavily on me. I was supposed to be focusing on preparing for the baby and enjoying this special time, but instead, I was constantly worrying about money. We had savings, but they were dwindling fast, and we needed to make sure we had enough to cover any unexpected expenses that might come up with the baby. We agreed that we needed to have a serious talk with Pam and let her know that we couldn't continue to pay her rent. We decided to have the conversation the next day. Pam came over for lunch, and after we finished eating, we sat down with her in the living room. I was so nervous, my heart was pounding in my chest. Jordan started by explaining our situation, how my income had decreased significantly, and how we were struggling to make ends meet. Pam listened quietly, but I could see her expression darken as she realized where the conversation was headed. When we told her that we wouldn't be able to pay her rent anymore, she got very upset. She said, "How am I supposed to survive without your help? I've been trying to find a job, but no one wants to hire someone my age." I felt bad for her, but I also knew that we had to prioritize our own family's needs, especially with a baby on the way. I tried to stay calm and explain that we had been supporting her for over a year and that we just couldn't afford it anymore.